Hello and welcome, I'm Kira Scribner, and this is a Victober TBR. It is late, I'm filming this on the 9th of October, but it has been a slow start to the month. But I want to talk about what I've already read, my plans, my hopes, my dreams. Will they all happen? I don't know. I have so many ambitions, but as I've talked about a lot, I have chronic health and I currently am a governess, disgraced and rejected by the people of the house, but loved by the child. Or hated, depending on how much French she speaks. The beginning of the Victorian period was almost 200 years ago. It started in 1837 and went all the way to 1901. So I'm really excited to talk about some Victorian books, and I'm really hoping that as I get into the groove that I will want to pick up some mammoths, because there is some tomes that I really want to pick up, but I'm tentative about putting them on my TBR because I have tried to start them and I felt too intimidated. But I have started a small book, and that is The Professor, and this is by Charlotte Brontë. So I have a love and hate relationship with Charlotte Brontë. I love her, but I also kind of hate her, and I have two bits of writing that she wrote herself to explain my complicated feelings. So first off, I'm going to be reading from the Norton Anthology of English Literature, the Victorian Age. So I have actually been reading some poems in here, and it is really delightful. I love these anthologies. I picked them up at thrift stores years ago. So I read some of Emily Bronte's work. I have enjoyed her poetry before. I know I've read it before, but Stars just hit me so much. Part of my gripe with Charlotte Brontë is the way that she treated her sisters, and also how she just kind of like to crap on other people sometimes. She wrote some really powerful words, especially in Jane Eyre, about being a woman and not being lesser because of that. But also she wrote things like this, that these were not common effusions, nor at all like the poetry women generally write. So you're writing about poetry and you call them common effusions. I have a perchance dislike for the fact that she uses $10 words whenever she can use. But then also just like, nor like the poetry women normally write. Like, she definitely has that flavor of, you know, being an exceptional woman, but not necessarily viewing all women as exceptional. And that also comes in with her sister's writing, because especially Anne Bronte is less known as a Bronte sister, because after Anne died, she purposely withheld the publication and republication of her works because she thought that they were too scandalous. So Charlotte, not my favorite. So Charlotte definitely has some grime on her in my image. Also, Jane Eyre is a great example of a book that parts of it I love and parts of it I hate, and I feel very confused. I also read Shirley, and I love parts of it. I also didn't like parts of it. Like, I feel like Shirley had less high highs and less low lows, but it's definitely an interesting book. So the book that I'm going to read for Charlotte Brontë is her least known book. This is called The Professor, and I think it's based partly on her Belgian experience of being a professor, etc. And I am enjoying it, but I would like to read part of the preface, which I also wrote some notes on it. She's talking about how she wrote this before Jane Eyre and Shirley, but it wasn't a first attempt because she had gotten out all of her first attempts previously and then ripped them to shreds. And then she wrote, "I had gotten over any such taste I might have had for ornamental or redundant composition, and come to prefer what was plain and homely." Girl, there's a thing called self-insight, and I think you sometimes lack it. Because I just appreciate that she uses the word ornamental and redundant composition to talk about how she writes plainly. Oh, my dear, my dear, my dear. I love you so much, and yet. But yes, I read the introduction last night. It was really lovely. It starts with an introduction and it's quite funny. Whenever I read Charlotte Brontë, I think I end up reading her because I do find her funny, even though I also find her redundant and ornamental. But yes, this line is great. So it's beginning his letter, and he's talking about how he left Eden and his uncles offered him a living that was his gift as a clergyman, and also offered that he can marry one of his cousins. And his description of this is, "I might perhaps be allowed to take as mistress of my house and head of my parish one of my 6 cousins, his daughters, all of whom I greatly dislike. I decline both church and matrimony. A good clergyman is a good thing, but I should have made a very bad one. And as for a wife," and then describes how to those girls he would make a terrible husband. I just find it really funny. I would make a bad clergyman. Anyways, so I actually know very little about The Professor. I know I've heard descriptions of it before, but I did not look them up again in order to go in blind. And yeah, I have read part of it physically. I've read a little bit of an audio, so I'll probably go back and forth. I am finding it really funny to read her. So yeah, I'm hoping to read this and then Villette, and then I will finally read Anne Bronte. I have read Wuthering Heights and I did not like it, so I'm a Jane girl. Going back to the Northern Anthology, I'm definitely going to pick some poetry and some other stuff in here as well. And I think it has a bunch of Lord Tennyson, so I might read some of it there. I am hoping to complete all of the challenges, and I think they are really interesting. But I think that just because I've been in a slump and had a hard time, like, getting into the competitive spirit, I'm just going to read what I want to read. But I would definitely like to participate in the personal challenges of reading Arthur Conan Doyle as well as Wilkie Collins to honor two booktubers that have been lost, Alice and Jennifer, and I would like this. I am nervous because these are two authors in which the entirety of their works I have disliked that I've read. So I have read A Study in Scarlet as well as The Sign of the Four. Did not like either of them, but I do have in this collection, which is like a 1920 collection, which is really cool. It is all of Sherlock Holmes' books, and I am planning on reading The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. I've always heard that his short stories are so much better than his novels, so I am hoping to enjoy that. I know that there's an audio version of it narrated by Stephen Fry, who's a great narrator, so I'm really hoping that that is going to smooth the transition and I'm going to like his short stories because his novels, not a fan. The other one is Wilkie Collins. I read A Woman in White and I really did not like it, but I think I thought that it was a horror novel, like a predated horror novel, when it's a mystery novel, and mysteries, unless they're by Agatha Christie, don't always work for me. So yes, I am curious. I have A Rogue's Life, which again, I know nothing about, and I have The Haunted Hotel. These are both short books by Wilkie Collins, and I have access to them. I will be reading one of the other, God willing, but yes, I'm not sure, and I don't know much about them. Haunted Hotel feels like very atmospheric for October, so I'm hoping that that might be the one. So my initial desire for the serialization challenge was to read a book that had been serialized but had not been completed, because I thought that would be so cool. So I thought Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. I love her so much. I read 3 of her novels, like North and South, as well as Cranford are 2 of my favorite. Mary Barton was good. It was not like my favorite, but it's just such good books. And I've heard nothing but praise for Wives and Daughters. It's so long, and I don't know if I have the juice in me to read it this month, but I kind of want to. I also thought it would be cool to possibly read The Mystery of Edmund Drood, because this is the final of Charles Dickens' books, and it is a partial novel, so it's not very long. It's also the last book in the Mega Dickens readathon, and I have kind of been participating. I've been watching all of Katie's videos and really enjoying them, but I've only read, I think, 1 Dickens books in that time, even though I keep on meaning to, and I'm inspired to read Dickens, and then I get distracted and don't read them. Talking about Charles Dickens, I am tempted to read both Bleak House and Great Expectations. Great Expectations I've had on my shelf for a long time. Bleak House is like one of his most famous. The big one that I would really like to complete is Phineas Redux. This is often the most unpopular book in the Palliser novels. This is the 4th book in the 2nd series by Anthony Trollope. I read Barset. So good. I started it in like 2022, and then I read, I think, 6 of his novels last fall, and it was wonderful. And then I read 1 in January, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna take some break until, like, you know, we get further into the year, and I haven't read Anthony Trollope since January, and I regret it because yes, I really love the series. And Phineas Finn, he's a complex character. Like, I like him, I don't love him, and I've often heard that this book is the worst, and I've started it, but I haven't really got into the rhythm of it. I'm like, I do love Anthony Trollope, but I haven't, like, being sucked into the story yet, and it's a long story. So my initial hope for this was that I was going to actually finish the series, because I was like, I feel like the Prime Minister just feels cool. The Duke's Children, so cool. I'm like, okay, if I can get through Phineas Redux, and maybe I will love it. Who knows? I do love his writing. Thomas Hardy is another author that I very much enjoy and appreciate, and The Hand of Ethelberta has been on my wish list for a long, long time. And I always forget about LibroVox, and it's such a great place because it has a bunch of books that are public record, that are not copyrighted anymore, and people record them. And I am so fascinated by this book because it tells the story of a girl who gets raised up, and no one knows that no one knows about what obscurity she came from. I believe that it was Katie who was talking about this book a long, long time ago, and she described the fact that there's a scene in which she's at a table and her father is the person serving her, but she can't acknowledge her father, and her father can't acknowledge her, because then that would acknowledge the poverty of her background. And that scene has lived rent-free in my mind, thinking about it and curious about it. So I really want to read this book. I also want to read Jude the Obscure. I also want to read The Woodlanders, The Return of the Native. There's so many books by him that I want to read, but I feel like I've always wanted to read The Hand of Ethelberta, so that's my hope. I also spend a lot of time at Stratford, which is a festival near me that is a world-class theater where performs a lot of Shakespeare and a lot of other plays. And I had the joy to see 9 out of their 11 or 12 plays this year, and it was so marvelous. I had such a good time. I went with a few friends. I saw the world premiere of Salesman in China, which is an adaptation of Death of a Salesman. Such a good play. mind-blowing. I saw Romeo and Juliet performed so well. It just like blew me out of the water. It was like amazing. It gave me, like, I've always enjoyed it as a play, but it just gave me such a new admiration for the play and the work. And then in the last week of September, I saw London Assurance, which is a 19th century play. A very flamboyant man who, you know, is in his late 50s and he has a grown son and he's marrying a young woman. It's like, it's a farce. It's very, very funny, very, very good. I laughed and had plenty of emotion. It was also just a well-crafted, funny, robust play. I'm really excited to read more of his plays. I'm very sad that on LibriVox there's currently only one that is called The Foul Play. It appears to be a play about a guy who was falsely accused of a crime and now has been sent to Australia in order to pay penance, and his like old flame is also on the boat. It just feels like it's going to be a farcical play about many different things. So I really want to read more of his plays because he performed a lot of plays. Another one that I found through Katie, through her live stream where she was reading it, is Trelawney of the Wells. It is about an actress who's retiring from acting because she is getting married, and it feels like it's going to be funny, but also like about plays, and it just sounds wonderful. We also have Oscar Wilde. He is one of my favorite playwrights. I really, really enjoy his work. I read, I think, 4 or 5 of his works last year and just was blown away by it. And I have not read Salome, which is his French play. I think it's a 1-act play. I'm really excited to read Salome, and I think it might be different because it's written in French and I think it's a little more scandalous than some of his other things. But yeah, I am interested to read it and to, I think, finish off his plays. I think that this will be the last play by him that was performed that I have not read. So I'm going to talk about some non-Victorian books, but before that, I also have Gothic Tales by Elizabeth Gaskell. This collects a lot of her spooky tales. I read The Nurse's Story last year, and it is creepy. Antony and Cleopatra. Talking about Shakespeare, I have started reading this one and I'm really enjoying it. It's just, I don't know. I read this a long time ago and I think I didn't appreciate it in the same way, but I like Shakespeare so much more than I did. Like, I always liked Shakespeare, but now I like Shakespeare, if you know what I mean. Like, I appreciated him, I found him funny, and I enjoyed studying him in class, but I'm enjoying reading him just on my own more, and I think it's because I've seen his works performed more, which gives me a greater appreciation for it. So I found a video production of it from an old Stratford production, which was great, and then also I've been reading an audio and also reading it physically. I'm just covering all my bases. I'm also really hoping to read Julius Caesar as well if I have time. This is a play that I've seen performed but have never read, and I would really, really like to read it because I saw it performed way back in 2016 and it was just like really good, but I was missing aspects of it because, you know, you don't catch everything in a performance that you do while reading. Another play that's very in theme for October is The Tragical History of Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe. So this is contemporary of Shakespeare, way back. A guy makes a deal with the devil. It feels very October-esque, and yeah, I'm hoping to read it and I think it'll be great. I'm also really hoping to read The Machine Shop by E.M. Forster. I really like E.M. Forster. This is a short story by him, novella, and I don't know anything about it. And then because it's October, we have my guy, Edgar Allan Poe. I read a lot of Poe and I don't talk about Poe because I have a collection, so I often don't catalyze his books separately because I read them in chunks. But I am hoping to read 3 of his short stories. These are his first detective novels ever. He wrote the first detective novels and they really inspired many of the people after him and inspired a lot of Victorians as well, which is really cool, even though he's an American from Boston. But yes, I'm really hoping to read his 3 detective novels following Auguste de Bronte, and these are set in France during kind of the Victorian era but across the pond. And yeah, I'm really interested in reading them and hopefully enjoying them, and hopefully they'll have some spook. I also probably will read some of his horror stories because they're great, and I read many of them, but he has so many things. Also, his poems are sometimes creepy as well, and they're great. So yeah, I will be working my way through this throughout the month. And then last but certainly not least, we have Batman and comics. So I'm a big fan of Batman. In September, I started Batman Year 1, and this is a retelling of Batman's first story. It's a little dark, it's great. It follows both like a young Bruce Wayne, but also a young Jim Gordon and their lives in parallel and the corruption in the city. It's by Frank Miller, one of the best known and regarded people in the comics industry. I read it 3-4 years ago, but when I read it following The Long Halloween and Dark Victory, which are some of the best known and regarded books, and they're in the same continuity, which is like a little bit outside of the like normal continuity of the DC universe. And I felt like I was slightly disappointed because I wanted them to be as great as that, and they weren't. But now that I'm reading it in like the correct order, I am really enjoying it. And I'm also reading this partly because I've been watching The Penguin, which is the adaptation of The Penguin on, you know, from the new Batman movie, which I didn't love that Batman very much because he didn't give me enough Bruce. But this Penguin, played by Colin Farrell, fantastic. I really love it. I really like Sophia Falcone, an actress that I've loved throughout many different moves. So yeah, I'm just like really compelled by it, and it's adapting that. And I'm like, I know it's been several years and I know how much I love The Long Halloween and Dark Victory. So I really wanted to revisit. I really, really want to read The Long Halloween and Dark Victory as well this month, but I'm having a little bit of issue with the supply and demand of comics. I used to read lots of comics and I used to read them online, and it's very easy to get access to comics online for free. And then a few years ago, I felt very convicted that I shouldn't be doing that because I'm not paying for it. And on the other side, I don't have money to buy comics because they are expensive to buy. And I love them a lot. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm just not reading comics unless I can get them from the library. And a lot of things aren't available at the library. So I was really hitting a dead end on how I was going to read comics and how I was going to be able to afford comics, but I really wanted to read them. So I did discover that my library does have a Hoopla, which does offer much more comics than Libby does, which is great. The issue with that is that Hoopla has a cutoff of only 5 volumes, which is not a lot for a month if you're reading comics, especially since not all of them are in big trades. Some of them are by single issues, and a single issue is not even a trade. I know this language probably doesn't make sense to everyone, but pretty much you can't read a full storyline. You're only reading chapters at a time, and then you get cut off, which is super frustrating. Because the other thing that I feel like I should feel slightly indulgent about, but one of my favorite channels of all time is Casually Comics. I watch her too much probably, but I really enjoy her really insightful, funny, often just great conversation on comics, new and old, especially old. She loves them. And this is one that she talked about, which was Joker One Operation, which is crazy. It's a manga from Japan, which follows the story of Batman becoming a baby and Joker raising him, which is a play a lot on the fact that Joker often has an obsession with Batman. This is often a well-mined conversation in different books. In this, we have Joker who cannot face the idea of not having a Batman. He has to raise Batman to be Batman when also hating Batman, but it sounds absurd. And I agree, it sounds absurd. But the part that actually hit me to want to read this is she was talking about how it really looks into actually the experience of child rearing in a really sensitive and more slice of life way. So it kind of looks at him like, you know, having to deal with the fact that he won't sleep, and also how to get into daycare, and how, as the Joker, do you get someone to accept you into daycare? And as someone who's currently working as a nanny, I was like, Ashley, I need to read this. And then I read it and I was like, oh, it's so good. And then Hoopla was like, you have read too many things because it's not collected yet. And my brain is, now that it's October, I'm like, I need to read more Joker One Operation. But that means I can't read The Long Halloween and Dark Victory because my library doesn't have physical copies of any of these books, which is so frustrating, especially Long Halloween and Dark Victory. These are from the 90s and they were very, very well established, famous Batman stories that like so many of the mythos now takes inspiration on, and the movies and all of those things. So the fact that they don't have access to it, it's absurd. I have to use a digital copy for these, and I only have 5. This is definitely way off the beaten path of Victober and Gothic literature, but these are where my heart is and my concerns, and yeah. So I want to read some Batman. It's gonna be great. I want to read some other things too, but my hope is to read some big audiobooks, to read some poetry, to read some plays, and to read some Batman and have fun. So yeah, let me know what you're reading, both Victober and not Victober, and if you don't read Victober books, you're missing out because this is like the highlight of my year every year. So I'm really excited, and I do just feel more encouraged and happy and ready to go conquer some tomes after talking to you guys. So thank you for listening. I really want to hear what you're reading this month, and yeah, I will see you in the next video. Bye.